white satin evening gown. A young man invited a young woman to a formal dance, but she was very poor. She could not afford to buy the evening gown she needed for such an occasion. "Maybe you could rent a dress," her mother said. So she went to the pawn shop not far from where she lived. There she found a white satin evening gown just in her size. She looked lovely in it, and she was able to rent it for very little. When she arrived at the dance with her friend, she was so attractive everyone wanted to meet her. She danced again and again and was having such a wonderful time. But then she began to feel dizzy and faint, and she asked her friend to take her home. "I think I've danced too much," she told him. When she got home, she laid down on her bed. The next morning, her mother found that the daughter had died. The doctor did not understand what caused her death, so he had the coroner perform an autopsy. The coroner found that she had been poisoned by embalming fluid. It stopped her blood from flowing. There were traces of the fluid on the dress. He decided it had entered her skin when she perspired while dancing. The pawnbroker said he got the dress from an undertaker's helper. It was used in a funeral for another young woman, and the helper had stolen the dress just before she was buried.
Oh, that's scary.
High beams. The girl driving the old blue sedan was a senior at the high school. She lived on a farm about 8 miles away and used the car to drive back and forth. She had driven into town that night to see a basketball game. Now she was on her way home. As she pulled away from school, she noticed a red pickup truck follow her out of the parking lot. A few minutes later, the truck was still behind her. "I guess we're just going in the same direction," she thought. She began to watch the truck in her mirror. When she changed her speed, the driver of the truck changed his speed. When she passed a car, so did he. Then he turned on his high beams, flooding her car with light. He left them on for almost a minute. "He probably just wants to pass me," she thought. But she was becoming uneasy. Usually she drove home over the back road. Not too many people went that way. But when she turned onto the road, so did the truck. "I've got to get away from him," she thought, and she began to drive faster. Then he turned his high beams on again. After a minute, he turned them off. Then he turned them on again and off again. She drove even faster, but the truck driver stayed right behind her. Then he turned his high beams on again. Once more, her car was ablaze with the light. "What is he doing?" she wondered. "What does he want?" Then he turned them off again. But a minute later, he had them on again, and he left them on. At last, she pulled into her driveway, and the truck pulled in right behind her. She jumped from the car and ran to the house. "Call the police!" she screamed to her father. Out in the driveway, she could see the driver of the truck. He had a gun in his hand. When the police arrived, they started to arrest him, but he pointed to the girl's car. "You don't want me," he said. "You want him." Crouched behind the driver's seat, there was a man with a knife. As the driver of the truck explained, the man slipped into the girl's car just before she had left school. He saw it happen. There was no way he could stop it. He thought about getting the police, but he was afraid to leave her alone, so he followed her car. Each time the man in the back seat reached up to overpower her, the driver of the truck turned on his high beams, and the man dropped back down, afraid that someone might see him.
That one's scary.
There was a little twist there, huh?
Yeah.
The man was trying to save her.
That is a twist.